Hey, this is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer. We've got some great diving today. We're getting ready to go to Weekie Watchie Springs, right above Tampa, Florida. It's over 400 feet deep and home to the mermaids. And then we're going to Palm Beach, Florida, and then to California in Beverly Hills. Stay tuned. This is Weekie Watchie Springs. It's crystal clear, and if you remember in the 1950s and 60s, they featured mermaids here, which of course they still do. They have 2 shows a day. I always wanted to get a diver or model into the water so you could see how crystal clear this water really is. Right below her is a cavern entrance, and it goes down to a little over 400 feet deep. Little turtles are in here constantly. Now she's in a little deeper portion of the spring. Goes down to about 65, 70 feet at that point. And this is the glass, the plexiglass, at which the audience looks at the mermaid show. This is the little kingdom that the mermaids come in and out of during the show. And notice the crystal clarity of the spring. This is algae that comes up from the bottom of the spring. It's well nourished by sunlight. All of the mermaids in Weekie Watchie Spring have been trained in scuba. They're all certified divers. And believe it or not, breathing out of the tubes that they do, which is unlike scuba, is much harder. This is down under scuba that's about a mile from the springs, and they can meet all your diving needs, your equipment needs, and your air refills.
Come join Allison, Brian, and Brittany at Down Under Scuba. At the end of June, we're going to have our 36-foot Seahawk boat. We're going to be taking people out 30 feet for open water dives and once a month out to the middle grounds. So come and see us. We have a good selection of AB Biller spear guns, JBL.
Now here we are in Palm Beach, Florida, and we're going on a dive about 60 to 70 feet deep. And notice the visibility isn't quite what it normally is. This time of year, which I think was March, the currents get a little more severe, the wind gets a little higher, and the visibility goes from possibly 80 to 90 feet to probably 30 to 40 feet during this particular dive. Beautiful queen angel fish, and these are the type fish that you see on just about every dive off Palm Beach. We're about a half mile to 3/4 mile offshore. And we're shooting fairly close-ups today because of the lack of visibility. These are lobsters ready to be caught. There's very little current on this dive. Normally you might have about a knot current, which is almost like a slow walk, and you can cruise. It's called a drift dive. You don't even have to swim or kick your fins. The current just takes you slowly along. This is commonly known as a puffer fish. When approached by an enemy, it simply sucks in a lot of water and gets to about double his normal size. These reef fish are literally thousands on this reef. Been diving pretty much all over the Caribbean, and there's more fish life off Palm Beach than just about anywhere else. That's a little Sergeant Major. Now we're back on top, and usually after every dive we stay about 30 to 40 minutes to let the nitrogen wear out of our systems prior to the next dive. And this is our second dive. We're in about 50 to 55 feet of water. These reef fish come in outrageous colors: yellows, reds, purples, blues. This is a cable right in the middle of your screen. That's the transatlantic cable that goes from the United States to Europe. And these turtles are protected, and they're on just about every dive. Palm Beach is very famous for its turtles. There's certain divers that are licensed to look about these turtles and do studies, primarily from federal grants. This is a French angelfish. Notice the unique coloring. Now the visibility is probably the lowest that it's been since we started our dive. Usually the higher the waves on top, the less visibility on the bottom, and today's seas were between 3 and 5 feet. As you can see when the boat makes its recovery. This is a tiny little baby stingray that was brought up for study, and he'll soon to be released. She's holding several dozen shells that Tom there on the right of your screen has picked up off the bottom. Tom's known as a solo diver. He goes in before anybody, away from everybody else. He's so experienced that he can do this, and he's mainly into shells. This is topside, called the Rutledge Inn. It's a diver's motel, and it's in Singer Island, Florida. It's right on the beach. Best value for a diver. And this is right in front of the hotel. The seas that day were very calm, about 1 to 2 feet. Now we're getting ready for another charter. And that's a boat that you hope you'll never see, unless of course you absolutely need to, the towboat. Now we're getting ready for our pickup. This is back at the Rutledge Inn, and these parrots were there just about every day. 2 or 3 people had them as pets, and they were talking, and quite a hit with the audience. Divers came in every afternoon, and they were greeted by these parrots. Hello, this is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer. We've been diving Palm Beach, Florida today, some of the best diving in North America. If you'd like to dive Palm Beach area, just get certified at your local dive agency or YMCA and come on down. Now we jumped all the way to Southern California. We're in Long Beach, California. And we're getting ready to board on the left the Queen Mary that sits in the Long Beach harbor, and right in the middle of your screen is a Russian submarine that's also on exhibit. It's incredible that we hunted those submarines years ago. This is the famous Beverly Hills Hotel right in the middle of Beverly Hills. This is where Howard Hughes lived for years. Movie stars are constantly in and out of there. Donald Trump was in that day. It's the home of the famous Polo Lounge that you hear about in celebrity circles. This is the pool area in the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's right in the middle of almost like a forest. Now we're going to the coast. And this is right off the beach. A lot of arcades, volleyball. And this is the home of Muscle Beach. This started in 1950. primarily by a man named Steve Reeves, who was one of the first Hercules in those type movies. This is Santa Monica and Santa Monica Beach. A lot of TV series are still shot here, primarily because the locations are quite close to the studios and the expense is far less than going abroad. This is right in front of the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's the Will Rogers Memorial Park. Beautiful gardens and grounds. There are a lot of joggers around here, especially early in the morning. Temperatures in the low 70s. Pristine blue skies, believe it or not, right in Southern California. This time of year, the skies were clear. Very little smog. Quite a tourist area in Southern California. Now we're going to go on one of the most interesting dives in Pompano Beach, Florida. Visibility was excellent. It was almost 100 feet. The first dive is a wreck dive, and we're in about 90 to 95 feet of water. And this is looking up toward the surface. This is a very safe wreck. All the windows and glass have been completely removed. All the oil and gas residue. And when hurricanes come up, they really further damage these wrecks almost 100 feet deep. They just throw them around on the ocean floor kind of like they were toys. These are soft corals that had grown on the wreck. There was quite a current that day, probably 2 to 3 knots. There were 3 wrecks all located right next to each other, separated by only a quarter of a mile. And Pompano's greatly began to be known for its wreck diving. These fish are inside the wreck. And the longer a wreck has been down, the more fish that come on it. Very good eating fish. And as long as you maintain yourself inside the wreck, there's no current, of course. But once you get over the lip of the railing, you have to contend with it. This is a blue wrasse. And these are 2 butterfly fish. They always come in 2s, stay with each other. Now we're almost on the surface, getting ready to surface, and we're in what's called a 5-minute zone. It's about 15 feet under the water. Nitrogen come out. We're on dive number 2 for the day. This is a French angelfish. You see, this eel is not friendly. We're inshore a little bit more on this dive, and the visibility is not quite as good as the first deeper dive. This is a tube sponge, very soft coral, and you can get an idea of the current. best way to view these reefs is to swim horizontally to it so you can look under the little caves and crannies. Beautiful queen angelfish. Pompano is just about 40 miles south from Palm Beach. Usually has about the same type visibility on any given day. This is called a ledge dive, and as you can see, the ledge is about 8 to 10 feet high off the bottom of the ocean. Now we're coming out of our first Pompano Beach. If you'll notice, the water is perfect calm, just like a lake. This means optimal visibility, and on that particular day, it was almost We're not quite a quarter of a mile offshore, and you can see the high-rise condominiums. This is a bait box, and this was over the side of the boat to attract sharks, so we could attempt to video them. Because we're so inshore, the visibility here was about 40 feet. This is one of the strongest currents that we had on the dive. And the currents had mushed up the water just a little bit. Some soft coral growth. Seem to be fixated on angelfish this trip. Very colorful soft corals. Coral ledges. Now the sharks have come in for the bait. Used to be that you could put an actual bait box over the side of the boat and film divers interacting with sharks. But the state of Florida a few years ago and sharks. Well, the sharks didn't get the message and they still fall for the empty bait box. They're usually quite docile, but they don't want to be bothered, and they will react if you do bother them. He's got quite an escort with him. This again is in about 30 feet of water. And the mere sight of that bait box almost Now, one of the dive masters had brought the bait box all the way to the surface, and the sharks are so conditioned, they too go all the way to the surface. That's the anchor in about 25 feet of water. And that's the shell of the ship, or the rib. This is a great dive for snorkelers too because it's so shallow. These are some more soft corals. And the wreck was well within range of the anchor. That's a sea fan. The current was quite a Now we've ended our dive and we're coming back in the inlet. And the inlet is very calm too, just like a lake. To give you a good idea of the harbor area and the pool area. And these are some of the high-rise condominiums in the Pompano Beach area. Now we're on another wreck dive in the Pompano Beach. So there is no current. And this is the top mast of the wreck, and swimming on down the sides. And notice the bubbles coming in. And these two divers are coming up from the insides. Again, all of the wrecks on the east coast of Florida have been sunk with the idea of drawing tourist divers in the area. They're completely been safety engineered. All the glass has been and this is looking at the sides of the wreck. It's such a relief to get out. We're going slowly up, again in about 90 feet of water, and now we're ready to surface after about a 5-minute safety stop. Our next dive is a different part of and these angelfish are often paired in twos. That's a small grouper on the left of your screen. In a few years he'll be great eating, but right now he's not because the reefs are protected. This is a parrotfish. You can hear him eating underwater. The visibility has greatly improved since we're a little farther offshore. That's a brain coral in the background. We've been diving Pompano Beach right next to island diving. You know, probably one of the main differences between diving in Pompano and in West Palm Beach, the current comes closest to the United States off Palm Beach, about a quarter mile offshore. And this brings nutrient-rich currents and improves the visibility vastly. See what you think about the difference. Now we're diving Palm Beach area again. Of where we were in Pompano Beach. And this wreck is also in a little less than 100 feet of water. And again, that's a blue wrasse. And right after that, there's a turtle study going on in Palm Beach. And these are licensed divers, one of the few divers that the state will allow to handle turtles. And that's a gorgeous grouper. The visibility on the seas on top were a little high. This turtle followed us around on most of the dive, and they know they're protected. Now we're going to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to see where some of this water comes that we love to dive in. To Pikes Peak, which is again right outside of Colorado Springs. And it was very interesting to know that Lieutenant Pike, that Pikes Peak is his own namesake. He got stuck with his men on the bottom and never did make it to the top, yet they named it after him. The area is pretty thin up top. And there's a restaurant, a deli. And this is a park of the Red Rocks, again in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's a drive-through trail. These vistas and scenes are excellent. You can either right in the middle of the Wild Wild West. This Broadmoor Hotel, one of the famous in Colorado Springs. Very ornate and luxury. It's best known for its golfing, with the mountains in the back. The views are stunning. There are flower gardens in every direction. And the pool is right next to the lake. Well, we've been to the top of the mountain, to the bottom of the ocean, had a great diving experience. This is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer, and I'll see you next time.